Hello, everyone. This is for Friday, September 16th, recording of a walkthrough of the guided notes, the slides, just like we do in class. This is for if you are absent or if you want to watch back to try to get a better understanding in preparation for exams, or if you feel like you just misunderstood something, you want just to review again. This is to benefit you, by no means required. Today we were talking about the era of good feelings. So yesterday when we were talking about the War of 1812, we talked about how nationalism and patriotism were increasing. People were beginning to be proud to be Americans. They were enjoying their time as a united front against a common enemy. People were becoming closer with one another and more confident in the federal government. So by era of good feelings, we mean that there's not too much interpersonal conflict between different groups of Americans. Sectionalism is on the back burner. Those fights between the Federalists and Democratic Republicans that we talked about in Unit 1 are no more because the Hartford Convention demolished the Federalist Party. So now the only prominent political party is the Democratic Republicans. And the Democratic Republicans have really moved more towards the middle of the political spectrum. So people are feeling united, feeling like they support that political party for the most part. So we have a few effects of the war that we did discuss yesterday. So I want you to pull up the 09-16. I'll write this on the slide for you. So if you were not here, pull up the 09-16 era of good feelings warm up on Canvas. Make this bold and big so that you can see it. So given what we have on this slide here and what we talked about yesterday, make some predictions for what you think is going to happen after the War of 1812. You can also use the title of today's work, today's lesson, and what we just talked about on that intro slide. So we're seeing an increased national pride, increase in American manufacturing, because remember, they could not trade effectively during the war. So they turned to different ways to make profit, including manufacturing. We have continued movement west as the Native American people continue to lose out on their territory. And we have the demise of the Federalist Party. That was what we just talked about, that after the Hartford Convention, the Federalists were seen as devilish, unpatriotic. So people are not generally supporting the Federalist Party anymore. There, of course, will be still some differences in opinions between different groups of people, but not a strong division between political parties. You're going to take just a few minutes, use these, and come up with a newspaper headline, for example. It can be simple, it can be creative and fun, but you're going to incorporate some of these effects into what you believe is going to happen next, as if it's on the front page of the newspaper. So mine is, in quotes, proud to be American, because this is the first time people are going to be saying something like that. Before, people were very deeply identifying with their state and their state identity. This is one of the first times in American history where the larger population is identifying as American, is proud to be American even. So we relate that back to this era of good feelings. People are feeling good about being American. So I hope you all will come up with some interesting ones in class today. I'm going to move on from this slide. If you're watching this because you're absent, go ahead and throw one in the warm-up and see what other people came up with. I'm going to delete this slide because we ended up putting it in Canvas rather than in Pear Deck. So this is our unit calendar. We've already covered Jefferson and the War of 1812 on Wednesday and Thursday. Today, which is Friday, we're covering the Era of Good Feelings. Next Monday and Tuesday, the 19th and 20th, we're going to cover Jackson. Wednesday, the 21st, we'll cover Manifest Destiny. Thursday, the 22nd, we'll cover the Mexican-American War. Friday, the 23rd, I will not be here. Mr. Mihal is going to be covering the lesson for us, and he's going to discuss social reforms, and you'll start on your study guide, which, just like the first unit, you'll finish over the weekend for a completion grade, and we'll take it up for accuracy on the test day. Monday, the 26th, is a teacher workday. Tuesday, the 27th, we'll finish up those social reforms and do a review and walkthrough of the study guide. And on Wednesday, the 28th, we have the Unit 2 test, and all of the crash course videos are due. So it feels far away. This unit is a little bit longer than the last one, but it's already only a week and a half away. So we're definitely just letting you know you have a heads up of the timeline in your mind so that you can effectively pace out your work. So today we're going to get into Monroe's America, the Era of Good Feelings, and this is on your guided notes. So let's start with the definition of nationalism. I'm going to make a slide for the class here. What is nationalism? What is nationalism? Because that's a word that we've been throwing out around here, and it's perhaps not everybody knows what that means. So we go over it in the next slide, but in class, I'm going to have the students guess as to what nationalism means, because you've probably heard that word before, and you might have some kind of understanding of what that word means, but not completely. So nationalism is a unification of the country. I don't know why my Pear Deck is not working right now. It's a sense of unity, a sense of patriotism and pride in the country, just like we were talking about on the last slide. So this is going to be very much contributing to how we call this era the era of good feelings, because people are identifying with their country over their state identity for the first time. People are proud to be American for one of the first times on a larger scale. The country is valued over the states. And this was due to the Louisiana Purchase they saw very much as a win for the country and the winning of the War of 1812. Now, why would we put winning into quotations there? Why is that winning? The United States did win. So I'm hoping to get some participation from the class there. Think to yourself about why would put winning in quotes. That's actually because that Treaty of Ghent that ended the War of 1812 was largely didn't make any wide-scale changes. So we won the war, but not much changed for us legitimately, or for other groups of people. Not many changes from this war, simply loss of lives. So we have the demise, that means the end of political partisanship here. So that means that people are not very much relying on two different political parties. As we've been talking about, Federalist Party has been on the decline since President Adams. And at the Hartford Convention, Federalists were considered devilish, unpatriotic, and they ceased to exist after the war. In the 1816 election, Monroe discredits the Federalists and gives himself an easy victory. So here, remember in the election of 1800, 1812, in other years that we've been studying so far, there has been a pretty decent division between these northern New England areas, these maritime states, and the southern states. Usually Virginia, NC, SC, Georgia, these ones will typically vote together as Democratic Republican, whereas these northern states were typically voting Federalist. So now we have many people agreeing that the Democratic Republican Party is doing a good job. Jefferson really helped bring up the Democratic Republican Party. People liked Madison as well in the previous election. He was the president during the War of 1812. So Monroe is going to continue that upward trend in support of the Democratic Republican Party, and Federalists, previous Federalists, are now getting on board with them. Skip one, nope. All right, we also have that first industrial revolution that we're talking about. The War of 1812 has led to an increase in manufacturing. But of course, there are going to be connections between manufacturing and enslavement. The market revolution developed a national economy based on trade between three regions, leading to economic interdependence. The North worked in manufacturing, the South on agriculture, and the West in mining. So this leads to an increase in mass production. Women joined the workforce and waged labor increased. So we have, without the agricultural development in the South, the manufacturing in the North would not be as effective. So in order to focus in that region on manufacturing, they need to be trading within other regions for that food, those grown goods that the South is producing. So not only is previously the North would have the means to be growing their own food and supporting their local communities. Now the North has moved away from each family or each community having farmland where they can produce food for themselves, and now they're trading with the South. So the South is producing even more food, even more raw materials and resources in order to support the North and the West as those regions develop different economic means. As part of this industrial revolution, we have a lot of inventions beginning. So we have interchangeable parts invented by Eli Whitney. These were identical components of machines that could be substituted for one another, and this is very important in the history of manufacturing. It leads to mass production, which transformed the organization of work. We also have the cotton gin invented by Eli Whitney, which makes cotton profitable and expands slavery. Previously, without this invention, cotton was very difficult to pick, almost not worth that work to be going out and picking so much cotton. It's just very inefficient, can be painful, very tedious, where it takes a lot of time, energy, labor, manpower. With this invention, it makes it more profitable. We also have the sewing machine, which allows more women to work in textile factories. The clothes become pre-made and the textile industry, that's the making of clothes, becomes more profitable. So again, before this, it would be common for each community or even each household to be making their own clothes. But with the invention of the sewing machine, we see people establishing factories that are producing those clothes so that each household doesn't need to produce them on an individual basis, or even each community. That can now be traded within regions. We also have the telegraph and Morse code. So the telegraph allows for instant communication and connects the nation and nationalism to local trade and commerce. It can help connect different nations with one another. For example, as you're trading with other nations, it's not always wonderful to just wait for a ship to show up. So this technology is going to allow for more efficient communication in order to streamline trade. We also have the steel plow invented for agricultural benefits. John Deere invented this, and it helped farmers dig up soil and plant faster. Planting faster meant more crops. We also have the mechanical reaper invented by Cyrus McCormick. This also helped farmers harvest their crops faster, and faster harvest meant less waste and more profit. If you have only so many people who can go and harvest the products, some of those products might rot or go bad before people are able to reach them. If it's a several-day process, limited labor, lots of crops. So this is going to help with less waste and therefore more profit. Foreign policy also had an era of good feelings. People were supporting this foreign policy standpoint. President Monroe felt that he had to respond to the threat that European countries might try to win back their former Latin American colonies. And this is where they established the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was a warning to Europe. You stay out of the West being the Americas, and America, will stay out of the East. Europe, Africa, China, Asia. This claimed America's perceived and believed right to intervene. And the Monroe Doctrine became a policy of mutual non-interference. So it was an agreement for America not to interfere in the East and Europe not to interfere in the West. And if Europe were to interfere in the West, they would feel that they had the right to intervene and change their policies and make and fight them off and start wars over it and start battles over it, and that would therefore be their place to speak on that issue. So look at this political cartoon here. This is meant to be Monroe standing over the Americas holding a bat that says Monroe Doctrine. So given this cartoon and what we talked about on the last slide, what is the goal of the Monroe Doctrine? We also have I'm sorry, I guess we should talk about this since we're not actually in class right now for you all to write your own responses. So the goal is to, quote, protect the Americas from European involvement. So the goal of the Monroe Doctrine here is being to prevent European colonization in the Western Hemisphere. I'm sorry. There we go. My bad. Thank you for waiting. The Marshall Court is also part of that era of good feelings. So we have mentioned John Marshall before, and he believes in the power of a strong constitutional government. So we mentioned him when we talked about Marbury versus Madison. That was when he ruled out the ability for the courts to be packed with one political party. Remember, that was when Adams was the lame duck president when he was in his last months of office and had lost re-election. And when he was trying to fill the courts, I'm sorry, I just got a notification that my screen share is paused. Let's see if we can fix that real quick. My screen sharing is paused. I don't know why. Okay, it says I'm back. I have no idea what happened. So this is the judge who ruled that was unconstitutional to pack the courts. John Marshall is a Federalist. He was put into this position long ago when the Federalist Party was still popular, and he believed in the power of a strong central government. So many of his tactics are going to support that sense of strong central government. In McCulloch versus Maryland, he establishes that the Bank of the United States is legal through implied powers. State governments cannot tax federal property, And this strengthens the supremacy clause.
Good morning, teachers.
That was just a school announcement. Lots of interruptions today. So the supremacy clause is the idea that the federal government is stronger than the state governments. So this is going to strengthen that idea. We also have Gibbons versus Ogden in 1824. In this case, the federal government was given the authority to regulate interstate trade between the states. So remember, this is going to be becoming more popular as the North, South, and West develop different sets of goals, economics, and they begin to rely on one another rather than each region producing a little bit of everything. In this cartoon, one ship says, "Get out. New York gave me the exclusive right to operate steamships in New York waters." And this ship says, "Wrong. New York gave the United States the exclusive right to regulate interstate commerce." So this is what this Gibbons versus Ogden was kind of about, is about this the right to trade on these New York waters. So I want you to answer this question on your Paradex. If you're at home, just think about it. You can jot down your answer somewhere. How did the Marshall Court decisions impact the federal government's power? How did Marshall Court decisions impact the federal government's power? So take a minute to think about that. We just kind of went over it on the last slide. It increased the power of the federal government. So we can see increase in the supremacy clause, that the federal government is stronger than state governments. Authority to regulate interstate trade, again, strengthening that supremacy clause. State governments cannot tax federal property. Those are all examples of how the federal government's power was increased in the Marshall Court. So we have sectionalism continuing to increase, even though it is this era of good feelings. Sectionalism is placing your own region's interest above national interests. So we see differences between the North, the South, the West, and those regions are placing their own region's needs over the needs of the entire nation. So Henry Clay and James Monroe come up with this system to try to unify the American economic system by creating a system of economic interdependence. The North will buy agricultural goods from the South and West. The South and West will buy finished goods from Northern factories. So this will create a focus on interstate trading rather than international trading. So it will be beneficial to each region to remain in good terms with the other regions because they will want to continue that trade as it is profitable for everyone. There are three parts for them to be establishing this economic system. The first is tariffs, which will protect American industry. They'll help the North, but hurt the South and the West. So this is a tax on foreign imported goods. So this helps the North because they're the ones producing manufactured goods, but hurts the South and the West because they now have to buy their goods from the North because of this tax, because that tax is going to make it cheaper to buy the goods from the North, even though it may have originally been cheaper to buy from overseas. So they're basically putting this tax on to encourage the South and West to buy from the North. We also have national currency, which is encouraging interstate trade and nationalism. So before, the states could have their own currencies, but if you're trying to encourage the states to trade among themselves, you want them to have a common currency so that you don't have to do those exchanges. You won't have to worry about how much they value your currency or what your currency's value is compared to other currencies. You can just trade with the new American currency. And the third part of the American system is internal improvements. It's going to be an increase in speed and efficiency of trade. So we have the National Railroad in the north, the Erie Canal in the north, and the Transcontinental Railroad in the west. So those are going to be things that they could use to send that trade to other areas of the country. So this is a quote. As you read this quote, I want you to answer the question on your Pear Deck. Why did Clay include a protective tariff as part of the American system? So we also just talked about it on the last slide. So this quote is meant simply to help you answer that question more effectively. Let's read it together. But if we throw our ports wide open to the admission of foreign productions, free of all duty, what ports of any other foreign nation shall we find open to the free admission of our surplus produce? We may break down all barriers to free trade on our part, but the work we will not be complete until foreign powers shall have removed theirs. There would be freedom on one side and restrictions, prohibitions, and exclusions on the other. The bolts and the bars and the chains of all other nations will remain undisturbed. So basically, he is saying here that if they do not have this protective tariff, that the South and the West will probably continue to buy from other nations. And they want to use the North's new manufacturing power to benefit their own nation. Because the North is just getting started with with this industrial revolution, they don't have many connections. They don't have as profitable as methods as other countries might yet. So it might be a bit more expensive for the South and West to buy goods from the North rather than from other countries. But Clay is saying that this is going to ultimately help America as a whole. So you can write anything about that in your Pear Deck on your sheet. This is just another representation of Clay's American system. So we have the policy proposed. This policy proposed a protective tariff to get funding for transportation. So in addition to just encouraging sales to the north, a tariff is a tax. So that extra money is going to the government, and they're going to use that for transportation to further help this system. Transportation improvements would include better roads and canals. Before this, many roads were still dirt, still gravel. Good transportation would lead to industrial growth. The South and the West could cheaply transport raw materials to the North and East for manufacturing. And then manufactured goods could then be shipped back to the South and West. So talk with your table for just a minute about what is the goal of the American system. What is the goal of the American system? So you can use what we already learned on the previous slides and this chart on this slide, which is organizing the information just in a different way. What is the goal of the American system? If you're not done thinking, you can pause and think a little longer. But overall, the goal is to create an interdependent trade system within the United States in order to create a more united front and make the different regions rely on one another in an attempt to decrease the effects of sectionalism. All right, let's see, what time is it? Let's see, we have been talking for 40 minutes. I think that today, let's see how long I think that you'll spend on this. Pause for 1 second while I while I evaluate whether we have time for this cartoon analysis. So we do have a little bit more time. So we are going to do at least one of these cartoon analysis. So I want you to look at this cartoon, identify symbols and assign meaning. There are some people in here. Who might these people be? See some worlds here, some maps. What could they mean? There's a hat on one of the globes. What could that mean? So you're going to look at symbols like those and assign meaning. What do you think the hat means, for example? Why are there two different globes here? You're going to identify the symbols and assign meaning to them. Once you've done that, you're going to answer the questions, what does this cartoon reveal about the Monroe Doctrine? Remember, that was the policy about how Monroe was going to protect the Western Hemisphere from European colonization. Monroe and America in general. And how does this cartoon impact your understanding of the Monroe Doctrine? So before we talk out loud or talk to each other, I want you to answer these questions on your Pear Deck. So take 2 minutes to think about this and write a response. You can do a bulleted list, but your answer should definitely be more than one line. There's at least 3 questions here. And that first one about symbols and assigning meaning, there should be multiple symbols. Take a few minutes to think about that. If you need more time, please do pause the video and take the extra time to think about the symbols and their meanings in these questions here. We're going to talk about them out loud here. So this is the Western Hemisphere in the center, and this is the Eastern Hemisphere. So they're, by dividing them into 2 different worlds, they're saying that these are worlds apart. They're extremely different. They're like 2 different Earths. They're so different. Monroe is placing this is Monroe, the president. He's placing his hat on the middle of the Americas, saying, even though I'm the president of the United States, I am claiming these Americas. I am, quote, protecting them with my Americanness. See, the hat has these stars and stripes on it as a United States symbol. He's saying this is essentially United States territory. Maybe we don't own it. Maybe it's not technically our territory, but it's not yours, he's saying to the Europeans. It's not your territory. It's much more mine, as in America's, as in the United States is, than it is yours, than it is Europeans. So that's the meaning of that hat. And these guys over here are meant to be Europeans who are looking over here because they're looking to colonize other areas in the Americas. So this cartoon just further represents the Monroe Doctrine. We have, if you were in class after you all typed your individual responses, I would have you share with your table, and then some people will share out loud with us. So I would hope that some of the students will share some of these answers with us. But this cartoon is just further revealing